And of course, we will welcome President Museveni and also President Ruto to the stage. We were just speaking about the gaps that still exist despite some of the investment that we've seen on the continent. I've been listening to both of you speak this morning, and it seems like there is more cohesion between both of your countries. I wonder if you speak to an investor and you talk about what the regional collaboration looks like now, what's different now than in the past, what would you say? President Museveni?
I think what is different is that the mistake makers have failed. So people have seen the mistakes. The mistakes have blossomed. They have seen. I think that's why people are beginning to see themselves different. You can see these are. I have been watching this for the last 65 years. I think Mr. Ruto maybe, are you 65? 58, you can imagine. 50. So, these young people have come up and they have seen. It would have been better if we, because like some of the other people, like the Chinese, the people like Lee Kuan Yew, they saw it earlier. But Africa also had a lot of additional problems. Like, for instance, landlocked countries.
Right.
If you are landlocked, even if you see something, if the coastal countries don't see it properly, you can't move. So the mistakes are our biggest teachers. Because, and the crises. The youth have no jobs. So I think people can now see, can listen more. Because there was a law. It was really ideological intoxication that if you, like for instance here in East Africa, how the East African community broke up in 1977 with Amin. People thought there was another way other than the East African community. But now later on they discovered that no, East African community is the only way, and that's how we came back.
President Ruto, have recent crises potentially accelerated some of this newfound collaboration between your countries?
Yes and no. I think the question you've asked is what is different now? And I think there is realization by all of us that the solution to the challenges and problems we have is not out there. It is right with us. If you listen from what Dangote has said, he has said investors from out there will not invest in our countries unless we take the lead ourselves. Why would somebody else take a risk? How is it their business to build our countries? It's none of their business, and I mean, rightfully so. First and foremost, we must realize that it is our responsibility. Others can only come to support us, but we must take the lead ourselves. And it doesn't start with entrepreneurs and industrialists like Aliko here. It starts with leaders like President Museveni and myself. Because a challenge that we have in our continent is a challenge of leadership. That's it. I mean, if the leaders are not willing to lead from the front, if the leaders are not willing to make the decisions, the policy choices that will take our country forward, because some of the policy choices are not necessarily popular. It isn't easy for It is not easy for President Museveni to say, if you are not making this choice, we are not going with you. You know, banning export of minerals is not an easy thing, because there are people who make money out of selling raw materials. So you have to tell them, no, this is not the right thing to do. So some choices have to be made by leaders. So it starts with us as leaders, making the right choices. Not convenient choices, not necessarily popular choices, the right choices. That's number one. Number two, it is to stop what President Museveni was saying, petty jealousy, you know, between us. You know, I'll give you an example. President Museveni decided that he is going to invest in the pipeline in Kenya because he believes that the pipeline in Kenya is not only important for Kenya, but it's also important for Uganda. When President Museveni told me, I went to him and I told him, please give us some of your iron ore for our business people here in Kenya. He told me, that is not the policy choice I want to make. I have already said nobody is going to take iron ore from Uganda unprocessed. Then I made the choice that the investors who are in Kenya, I persuaded them to go and invest in the in the plant in Uganda. You know, I was not selfish about it, because what will happen is that the iron ore in Uganda, the steel that is going to come from that iron ore is going to benefit not just Uganda, it's going to benefit Kenya as well. Instead of us importing steel from all over the world, it is cheaper for us to import steel from Uganda.
Right.
And because this is one region. So this, the beginning is the leadership that determine how we move forward. Let me conclude by saying, listening to Aliko Dangote here, it is not just leadership at our level, it's also leadership at the level of our business people. It would have been easier for Aliko Dangote to do trade of oil. You know, I remember speaking to President Olusegun Obasanjo, and he told me he had a meeting with Aliko here, and Aliko told him, if you don't change the policies here, it is easier for me to import oil cheaper, I make more money, sell, than to refine oil, unless you make the right policy decisions. And that is what Aliko is telling us here, that the private sector and us will invest in the refinery. And by the way, we are discussing a refinery in Tanzania.
The two of you.
Yes, we are not discussing a refinery in Kenya or Uganda. We are discussing that we are going to have a joint refinery in Tanga to benefit all of us, because that refinery is going to take on board the oil from DRC, the oil from Kenya, the oil from South Sudan, the oil from Uganda, and we will just need to build a short pipeline from Tanga to Mombasa, and the finished product will use the pipeline that we already jointly own with Uganda. So all our assets become profitable. But you need a longer term view, you know, to see it than just a short term, you know, country by country. And that is why President Museveni was saying fragmentation is also part of our enemy. That is why some people broke up the East African community, because they didn't see the benefit of the bigger market. They were just looking at individual countries. So that is the where we are at the moment. And it is different because we've all learned our lessons. The policymakers, like myself and President Museveni, We can see with clarity where this should go. Industrialists like Dangote here, they too can see. And AFC right here with us, and all these other good bank people, they also appreciate that it is their responsibility to invest in this infrastructure because it makes them money and it grows their bank balance sheets as well.
Thank you, President Ruto. Samaila, I wanted you to jump in because if we talk...
But Mujuku, you speak Swahili?
Not right now. Samaila, I wanted you to jump in because...
Just hold on. What is also new is that if you look at Uganda, the pool of scientists whom we have now, we didn't have them at independence. We now have people who can do anything. Automobiles, vaccines, electronics. So although we are meandering, making mistakes, but also some capacity was being built. Education, knowledge. We've got a lot of scientists. There's nothing you cannot make. So that is also new. So it is capacity there, but what he's saying, the eyes to see
the future workforce. Samaila, I wanted you to jump in. When you talk to global investors, is this regional cooperation, is that becoming a prerequisite? Because it seems like you've been speaking about this for quite some time, and it's seeming like now that we're getting government on board, this is actually starting to